Talk to me. I had a chance to watch the documentary. Have you had a chance to see it yet?
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay, you got to tell me your initial impression.
The first time I saw it, I was actually moved by the stories of Raymond and Jasmine and Brianna and Isaiah, and was very excited to see how they told that story with such nuance. I was a little bit shocked to see how much my father was in the film, if I'm being honest. Um, so those are my. But I was moved. It made me really proud to be part of the city of Stockton. It reminded me again why I love being mayor so much.
Well, I think you're exactly right. I didn't really know what to expect, but watching it, I told Mark, I said, I just wept. And then I was laughing, and I just think there were just so many. They just really take you on a journey, and it's so enthralling. But I'm also struck, Mr. Mayor, by how much access they had and how much you opened up and shared, allowing them in your home and really just allowing them to kind of tell your story.
Yeah, well, I think particularly um, in this moment, but this is before what's happening in this country was happening. But I just felt it was important if we were going to tell a story that was an honest story and a true story. Meaning it's not all negative, it's not all positive, but it's all real and all true. So I said, okay, I'll give access. I'm not going to lie. I did kind of push back about them, including my father in the film, but looking back at it, I'm glad they did. 'Cause I think it paints a full picture of sort of the motivation that underlines a lot of the work we're doing in Stockton to increase opportunity for everybody.
Well, I think you hit it right on the head when you talk about real. Because a lot of times people try to kind of paint over things or paint with broad brushes, but I think you all really were able to capture kind of the ups and the downs and the fact that I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you'll acknowledge that this has not been a crystal stair, if you will. And that has been the experience of Stockton. One of the things that Mark said was that he was so struck by the story that you can have a community who was knocked down, but not only does that community try and get back up, but then you end up on the forefront of these wonderful kind of conversations around how do we do a better social contract for our communities.
And I think that's what I hope people get from the film. This idea that what makes Stockton so special is the tenacity and the resilience of our residents. To go from bankruptcy to fiscal solvency, from record homicides to 40% reduction, from most miserable to all American city, that doesn't just happen. It takes leadership. It also takes grit and heart and focus and determination from the residents. So I think absolutely, and it's also a very special time now where people are looking at Stockton and looking at what we're doing around alternatives to incarceration to reduce crime and violence, to what we're doing with basic income, to what we're doing with our Stockton Scholars Scholarship Program as a sign of what folks should do, what other cities should do. So now cities are looking at Stockton as an example. I think a good example of that is just 2 weeks ago, we had the conversation about the Marriage for Guaranteed Income initiative I launched with mayors from now 20 cities from across this country who are saying we want to do what Stockton did in terms of providing opportunity for residents and then advocating for that at the federal level. So it's special to come from Stockton, California, which historically has been looked at as a place to run from, which historically has been looked at as a place with a lot of problems. But people are seeing that no, 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 Stockton's a city with great potential, with great people who are working each and every day to make tomorrow better than yesterday.
Well, and the challenge of this whole thing, Mr. Mayor, is some of the detractors will say, oh, the mayor is more concerned about his national profile and kind of the next chapter, if you will, and these HBO series and these types of things. But I mean, I think if anybody watches this, they see that, as you mentioned, it takes a village.
Yeah, 100%. I think those criticisms, when you can't critique a record, when you can't critique accomplishments, when you can't critique concrete things being done in a change, you have to make things up. And I tell people all the time, I started out as a 22-year-old council member, part time in the south part of the city. At a time when no one wanted to run. If I wanted to be famous, if I wanted a national profile coming from Stanford, there's a million things I could have done but running for city council. I could have went back to the White House. I could have went back to Google. I could have worked for Snapchat. I chose to come back to Stockton because I was motivated and still am that we have to make a change. And I think to your point, it's been amazing to not be a solo act, but to have a community of people, including young people who are pushing in the same direction and people who understand that when you do good work, when things actually change, when things get better, then of course people are going to want to take notice. And of course people are going to say, wow, what's happening there? And that's not something to run from. That's a good thing, particularly when for the last decade, if the majority of coverage about your city has been negative and about bankruptcy or the former mayor being investigated and arrested by the FBI and things of that sort, that you will want some positive press to change the perception and raise the morale of the city.
Well, and that's what I think it's about, right? It's about the collective pride that ought to exist there for our community. And I think for those of us who've been here and kind of, you kind of get in the day to day of it. But when you have something like this and you're able to look back and just look at some of the things that you were doing with the SEED program, with the advanced piece, with the Stockton Scholars, how do you react when you kind of see it packaged in that way?
Yeah, yeah. When I saw it the first time, to your point, I was like, wow, and that this is a lot of things happening all at the same time, and all with deep personal stories and real people and families are being impacted. And just very proud of just the cast of characters, the people of the city of Stockton who are doing the work to make things happen and are not and are offering themselves up as an example to the nation of what can be done and how things can get better. And I think for me, it was also another reminder that perfection is the goal, but you have to be happy with progress. That just even the conversation we're having today about the city of Stockton on this webcast is a radically different conversation than a conversation we would be having about Stockton just 8 years ago, just 5 years ago, which means that we're moving in the right direction. So it was great to kind of see the body of work from someone who I didn't know before they started filming, someone who doesn't work for me, someone who's an independent eye, independent person who came here, spent a year here, and found this beautiful mosaic of stories that illustrate the community I love, Stockton. So very proud of it.
So I asked Mark, I said, so how did this come about? What was and he said to me, he said, Chris, I have to give credit to HBO because we're thinking about, when we launched this thing, you had the election coming up, you had the midterms, you had what we thought would be the Summer Olympics around this time, you had, what they thought would the, presidential debates and all. So he was just saying the calendar really did not lend itself to kind of this focus in on this downtrodden community that has kind of picked themselves up by the bootstraps with this young, innovative mayor to come in and try to change things around. But he said, you look at what's actually happened and the conversations that are happening now around social justice and inequality and what can we do as a society to try to help each other. He talked about how it just seems serendipitous.
Yeah, again watching the film and realizing this is from literally 2 years ago, but the fact that what we were saying, what we were doing is so current, just speaks to just how we've been very future facing and future looking and understanding the need to get at root cause issues. And you could from any of the speeches, any of the conversations, any of the programs, you would think it was a 2020 discussion. And the fact that we were thinking like this and talking about this in 2018 just shows our community is actually forward thinking. That we're not backwards, that we're not regressive, but we're forward thinking and we're thinking about how do we create a future that's brighter for our children than today is. So I'm very also, it's not like a broken record, but very proud of that as well, because something that we talked about 2 years ago fits a moment now where the rest of the country is catching up and saying we need to figure out a way to increase opportunity for everyone and make sure that everyone actually has a shot.
And so talk to me about the moment then. We're in this pandemic, and I just looking at some of the work that you all did, boots on the ground, going into the schools, having these kind of work sessions with communities. Are you concerned that things might regress given the fact that we're kind of stuck in this virtual world? And it seems like one of the things that we got from that meeting was that you were hands-on, that you were showing up and being there to kind of say, hey, if I can do it, so can you.
Yeah, I think that the virtual world, this virtual governing is entirely different, but we've put in the work the past, not just 3 years, but even the 4 years I was on city council to build relationships, and also build relationships that aren't dependent on me, where folks can connect with their community-based organizations or with other mentors to get what they need. So I've actually been very impressed with the fact that, for example, we're continuing our decline in homicides and shootings, which has been 3 years in a row. And that work continues. Even during COVID-19, I'm proud that we are still having discussions about how do we continue to improve our police department with the announcement of the City Manager Review Board last week. I'm proud of the way we've rallied to create Stockton Strong to provide information and grants and food and everything people in communities need during this time. So I started off the pandemic a little bit worried, just given the and still am, just given the numbers, given the economic impact. But I'm also optimistic. I see how the groundwork we've laid have provided a great foundation to pivot and figure out how do we do this, create the same community feel in a virtual way.
Okay, so I want to take a moment to talk about one of the things that you mentioned, because you know I am one of those folks who I think would share your thoughts of. I grew up in a single parent household. Dad was not around in the household. I know that if it were not for education and me going to Morehouse College and having some of the experiences that I had, those were the things that kind of saved me, if you will. I could have easily been a statistic, as you talked about. How was it for you then to see that kind of painted out? It's one thing to say it, but it's another to see it on the screen and your father sitting there talking about that.
Yeah, that actually was jarring. Actually, I don't know if many people see their fathers be interviewed, but I've never seen my father interviewed. I didn't know sort of his explanation why he was incarcerated. So that was just moving to see and to hear. And I felt so guilty. And I had harbored all this anger and all this resentment for the time I was 7 years old to the time I was 24, without even understanding the full story, without hearing the story from his words and not from what I read in the newspaper or in the court document, etc. Um, but it was also reminding me of the old adage, as you said, like there, but the grace of God go I. And that part of the reason why I decided to run for city council and part of the reason why I'm running and rerunning again for mayor is that I understand I've been really lucky and privileged to have the opportunities I have had, to have everything that needed to go right. And that I understand that comes a responsibility to work and to fight and to push for a more fair and more just society. And I know that sometimes that makes people uncomfortable and sometimes that makes people annoyed, but that's what I'm here to do, to make sure that we all can live in a community where we all feel valued, we all feel seen, and we're all given just a chance, an opportunity to reach our full potential. So watching that on the screen was just a reminder that I'm doing this work for a reason. That's not by happenstance that I'm there. That it's there's a purpose to it, and I have to continue to walk in that and to do my best to create the best Stockton with the community that we can.
As a father yourself now, have you decided how you want to approach that going forward with your dad? And have you had a chance to, have you made a decision one way or the other?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love, and hopefully when he's up for parole, he'll meet the requirements and be paroled when that time comes. But I would love for my father and my son to have just a normal grandson, granddad, pop, whatever relationship. And my baggage, my experiences notwithstanding, I would love my sons to have just a radically different relationship with my father, and one that's rooted in the fact that they know each other and they've spent time together and that they've had experiences together without being in the visiting room. So I'm hopeful. I'm looking forward to that day because I think it'll be great for both of them.
Well, we cannot thank you enough for making time to chat with us. I'll just ask you, you know, you share, and politicians, especially these days, and any public figure, you give so much of yourself. Are there things that surprised you about this journey, this public foray?
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise has been um, you could do great things and good things, like give kids scholarships, like provide an income floor to people, like reduce the number of people being murdered, so more people being alive, and some folks will still be upset, still find fault, still make up lies, still try to resist and protest against that. And that's something I find to be frankly evil, but also just nonsensical. And I'm actually, when I first started, I was shocked, but then I realized that the status quo was the status quo for a reason, meaning that it has a lot of friends. A lot of people may talk about it, but a lot of people are actually comfortable with things remaining the same. Now, when you try to change it, when you show things are better, when you try to provide more opportunity for kids that maybe they didn't have, that ruffles some feathers. So that's been a big shock, but it's also something I know going forward should be expected anytime you try to make things better for everybody.
The pushback that you get on the road to try to better things for the community.
100%. But I mean, if it wasn't a little bit of a fight, it wouldn't be worth it.
Mm. Well, are there things that I have not asked you? Like I said, we are hoping to kind of do a larger conversation just around some of the things that this community has experienced, but where it has come. And when you hear from someone like Mark who says how he was just so struck, he said he started covering Stockton, with the market meltdown. And that was kind of the way he was kind of introduced. But then to be at this space now, where we're looking at some of the things that we're doing. And like you said, sure, there's pushback, sure, there's folks talking about, but you've been able to secure private donations in order to make some of this stuff work.
Yeah, I think one of the big things about Stockton is we know how to hustle. We know how to make things happen. We know how to make ends meet. And I think this film and our experience has shown that. Whether it's hustling to get scholarships for kids, or hustling to get money for homelessness, or hustling to get a testing center in Stockton. For the past 4 years as mayor, 4 years as city council, that's what I've been doing. I think the film really showcases that. I think it's an example of just the grit again and the resilience of the people of the city.
He tells me that they are now going to do this free to the public. Have you heard that? After the first week, HBO is going to make it available because, that's the other thing. It's about access to, especially for those who may not be able to afford a subscription based.
Yeah, it's huge. I think it goes to the fact that the Stockton story is definitely a story of Stockton, but it's a national and international story. That there's communities like Stockton everywhere. That there's kids everywhere growing up in poverty or with single parents or with incarcerated parents who have big dreams for themselves and their communities. And I hope that we're able to show them that's not easy, but it is possible, for you to have a seat at the table, that you can govern, that you can be a leader. And that be that things can get better, that communities can rally together and push forward and do what is necessary to make our democracy real for everybody who lives here.